Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to hearing from Ed Clayton under public input. Welcome, Ed. Come on up. Ed's going to talk to us about the green tracking of light rail, city centre to Mangere, and it's in your hands, Ed. We have your presentation and feel free to take us through it.
Kia ora, and thank you to the Chair for allowing me to participate in this committee meeting. Just to introduce myself, I am an environmental scientist that specialises in freshwater catchments. I've been working in this industry across private and public organisations now for the last 13 to 14 years, and I'm currently studying towards my PhD at the University of Auckland, where I'm looking at low-cost open source monitoring alongside communities to look at their interpretations of what freshwater catchments are like. So that's my introduction to this space, I guess. So I'm interested in light rail because of the effects it has in terms of transportation impacts on water. I'd like to start first with observing some of the upcoming reforms that we're going to see in freshwater. So the essential freshwater reforms, a key part of this is Te Mana o Te Wai. Now there are a hierarchy of obligations that councils will need to adhere to under Te Mana o Te Wai. The first one being that there is an obligation for the health and well-being of water in and of itself. And adjacent to this, there are principles of governance and stewardship which apply, and councils need to improve waterways for future generations so that their needs are met. We have several challenges that are upcoming as well for freshwater. We know that urban stream syndrome exists, whereby there are increases in floods and erosive powers, contaminants that get transported, and associated with that, there's also the loss of biodiversity in streams. Where we have impervious surfaces such as roads, we have a large generation of zinc being carried into environments. Zinc is a major part of tyres. Sorry, it's going a little bit faster than I thought here. I'll just see if I can move that back. There's an estimate that 10% of all microplastics in the world's oceans are generated from tyres as well. These are primary sourced from the wear and tear on road surfaces. And the Auckland Council actually recognises road surfaces as being a source of high contaminant generation where more than 20,000 vehicles a day present. We also have an issue of global biodiversity being lost, 1/3 in the current human lifetime. And we know that decreasing ecological carrying capacity accompanies this biodiversity loss. So I'd like to pose a question here. What would urban transport look like if the fundamental requirement was a net gain in water quality? So this concept brings us to light rail, green light rail. Now these are examples from overseas where lawn tracking is in place. This has been put in place generally for aesthetic purposes only and delineation of those corridors. We know from these examples that it does already reduce noise, heat island effects, embedded emissions, urban runoff, and it improves air and water quality, community health and community well-being through access to green space. So if we look at this concept of green tracking, the proposal we have in front of us is for Dominion Road, and we know that on this map here we have fractured basalt that underlies this area that recharges the aquifers that go out to the Miola Creek. A lot of these existing road catch pits and stormwater systems here go directly to soakage. But Dominion Road is also a road that carries 25,000 vehicles a day, so it is a high contaminant generating activity, and so far it only has gross pollutant traps present in some of those stormwater catchments. If we took this example of green light rail, we could design swales and bioretention devices that could treat the runoff coming from Dominion Road. So how this would work is that it would be built into the rail corridor, like those previous examples of green tracking, but with specific designs in place to treat that runoff. Previous designs for this green tracking of light rail do not actually have that outcome as a primary driver. And if we planted approximately 1,500 metres of swales and around 150 metres of bioretention devices into that corridor, we could treat the road runoff from Dominion Road. This here is some examples that exist of the sort of devices I'm talking about. So we have swales and bioretention devices. Starting at the bottom left, this is a car park in Auckland where the runoff is directed straight into this grass strip. That's a classic sort of swale design. Then we have some rain gardens up in the top left. This is sort of how we access, you can allow pedestrian access across these spaces. Then moving across to middle top, we have an example from Seattle whereby runoff is directed into this vegetated swale and sort of kept within the space of that road corridor as well. So it's bringing water back into the city and letting it sit there. And then examples of further rain gardens in Auckland and another swale that's designed in the US to hold water adjacent to a road. And that is my presentation, so thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you, Ed. Excellent. Now we'll take some questions for you, Ed. We'll commence with Councillor Walker.
Sure. So just picking up on the comment you make around the underlying geology, the fractured basalt that exists along a significant part of the route. Have you done any modelling around that, or engaged with Healthy Waters around what quantity of water we could be looking at there, which obviously could be quite substantial?
So the current stormwater system in that area, most of that already goes to soakage. So I think I'm not an expert in that. I'm a freshwater scientist, not an engineer. But effectively what you're doing is decreasing the amount of impervious surface in the area, so you'd actually slow the rate of runoff to the existing stormwater catchment there. But at this stage, this work that has been done is I've done this by myself in my own spare time, so I don't have a lot of those technical answers yet. It would need to go to a design process.
The reason I'm asking this, Mr. Chair, is quite obviously we're talking about a substantial quantity of water that can recharge an aquifer that will likely be increasingly important in Auckland's future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that aquifer is of importance. If we look to that receiving environment, there are a lot of permanent swing bands in that area. So we have a high level of pollutant generation. So if we again look to mana o te wai and those obligations we have, we must be taking steps to improve those outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are there other questions, members? No, look, Ed, thank you. It's a brief appearance, but it's an important appearance. You are also, in addition to being the planning committee here, the mayor and the deputy mayor with the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Infrastructure and Finance. That's Honourable Grant Robertson and Minister Wood. They are the sponsors for the light rail project. I'm also on the establishment board, and I can assure you that the environmental outcomes are critical to the business case and will be well considered. So what I propose is to forward your presentation through the establishment unit. That'll land with the project director, Tommy Parker, and he will socialise it with the board, along with other information when we consider a bit more detail on the light rail project. So we'll make sure it goes through. It's an important topic that you've raised here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, can I have a mover and a second? I'll have Councillor Mulholland, and I heard a voice over here. Councillor Walker, thank you. As movers, as the mover and the second, all those in favour say aye. 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 Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Ed.